She stood alone on the steel deck of the aircraft carrier, the ocean wind pushing against her like a force determined to erase her presence. The shouts of the crew, the shrill whistle of orders being barked, and the heavy thrum of engines all seemed to fade beneath one deafening truth: they didn't want her there. She had barely stepped off the transport helicopter when the security officer pointed at her boots, then at the exit ramp, and told her she didn't belong on this ship. For a moment, her heart sank through the deck beneath her feet. She had survived storms, crashes, and fires darker than night, but nothing cut as deeply as being dismissed by her own people before she had even spoken a word. Yet, she stayed still, because deep down she knew the ocean didn't bring her here by accident. Not today, not for this mission. Her name was Ayesha Qamar, an aerospace engineer who had once been embedded in classified rescue units. She wasn't a soldier, not officially. She had never worn the uniform in ceremonies, never collected the medals that others displayed proudly. But she had stepped into fires others ran from. She had volunteered for missions where the maps went blank and hope vanished. And she had carried losses that the world would never know, losses sealed behind documents stamped with heavy red ink. She had come to the carrier because she had been requested by a last-minute command from a committee she never fully understood. Something had gone wrong with the aircraft stationed on this ship, something only she could diagnose. But no one on the deck knew that. All they saw was a woman stepping onto their floating fortress without warning. And so the cold wall of hostility rose immediately. The sun glared against the flight deck as the wind tugged her hair loose from its tie. Ayesha set down her small black equipment case, hoping someone would at least let her introduce herself, but the officer's hard stare did not permit it. He stepped closer, tightening his grip on the folder in his hand, repeating that she was not authorized. The deck crew stopped working for a moment, casting brief, puzzled glances her way, as if silently questioning what rule she had broken by simply existing. For years she had forced herself to develop the strength to stand firm in the face of unfairness, but today the feeling returned, the sting of being underestimated, unwelcome, unrecognized. Yet she stood straight, her hands steady even as a knot formed in her stomach. She would not be pushed away. Not this time. She had spent most of her life in the shadows of military missions, assisting from behind the scenes, where names were omitted from reports and credit diluted behind layers of secrecy. It had never bothered her, she didn't do it for recognition. But there had been one mission that changed her forever, one rescue so dangerous that even recalling it in her dreams left her breathless. That night, deep in enemy terrain, she had coordinated an extraction operation after a crash that left half the team trapped. She guided them through gunfire, smoldering wreckage, and collapsing structures using nothing but failing comm systems and a map drawn from memory. She had personally gone into the crash zone, dragging out one of the pilots whose oxygen mask had melted to his face. He survived, but she had never met him again. Classified files had buried their connection, as though the story had never happened. Now, standing on this carrier, she felt the weight of all those unspoken stories pressing on her. She inhaled sharply, as if the ocean breeze could clear away years of being invisible. She reached for her authorization papers, but the officer stepped forward before she could present them. His manner was sharp and rigid, shaped by a life of command. In rules he never dared question. The humiliation burned through her chest, but she swallowed it carefully, understanding that anger would only reinforce his assumptions. Still, it hurt. It always hurt. Then the air shifted, first subtly, then unmistakably, as a commanding presence approached across the deck. The crew straightened instinctively. The officer stepped back. The captain had arrived. His footsteps were steady and deliberate, each thud against the metal resonating with the kind of authority earned only through decades at sea. He wasn't someone people simply ignored. Even the waves seemed quieter when he walked by. The captain stopped a few feet from her, his eyes narrowing with suspicion as he scanned her face. Ayesha felt a flicker of doubt. What if he, too, dismissed her? What if he sent her back on the same helicopter she arrived in? But then something almost imperceptible happened. His stern expression flickered, his breath caught, not visibly, but in a way she sensed more than saw. Recognition dawned across his features like the sun breaking open a storm. He stepped closer, as if needing to confirm what memory dared whisper. He had seen her before. Not here, not on this deck, not in this uniform, but in a hellish night of fire and chaos. A night the world would never know about. A night he owed his life to someone whose face he had never fully seen in the smoke. And now that smoke lifted. Ayesha felt her heartbeat quicken as she realized that somewhere deep in his memory, he was piecing together the fragments, the gloved hand pulling him from the cockpit, the voice guiding the rescue team when all signals went dark, the figure who refused to leave him behind even as explosions illuminated the sky in savage bursts. But she didn't look away. She didn't flinch. She simply let him remember. The captain's posture softened, just slightly, like steel warming under sunlight. He raised his gaze from the file in the officer's hand to the woman before him. The crew watched curiously. The security officer stiffened, sensing he had misjudged something crucial. Silence swept the deck, broken only by the rhythmic churn of propellers stirring the sea below. Ayesha's mind drifted briefly into memory, of how she had dragged him from the wreckage, of how his consciousness faded in and out, of how she whispered assurances he would never hear later, and of how she let go of his hand only once he had been airlifted away. She had never expected gratitude. She had never expected recognition. And she certainly never expected to see him standing in full uniform, commanding one of the largest naval vessels on the ocean. Yet here he was. The captain lifted his hand slowly. Instead of waving her away, he gestured for the officer to stand down. The man obeyed immediately. The captain then looked at Ayesha again, not with command, but with solemn acknowledgement. He knew who she was now, even without knowing her name at that moment. He knew the silhouette of the person who had saved him from the jaws of death. And as she saw that recognition solidify in his eyes, something fragile and long buried inside her stirred, a sense of validation she had never allowed herself to hope for. The captain finally spoke, not loudly, but firmly enough for the deck to hear. Though you won't hear the words here as dialogue, the meaning was unmistakable. She was not only authorized, she was essential. And anyone who questioned her presence would be questioning the captain himself. The officer immediately stepped back, his earlier confidence evaporating entirely. Relief washed through Ayesha in a slow, warm wave, though she kept her posture steady. She picked up her equipment case, and for the first time since arriving, she felt the ship accept her, as though the metal beneath her feet finally acknowledged she belonged here. The crew resumed their duties, but several glanced at her with newfound respect. She walked alongside the captain toward the internal access hatch, and in the quiet steps they shared, she felt gratitude, not only for his recognition, but for the strange twist of fate that brought their paths together again. Inside the carrier, the corridors hummed with soldiers moving purposefully, turning gears of a greater mission. The captain briefed her on the critical malfunction in one of the aircraft, an issue so severe it could jeopardize an upcoming operation. As she listened closely, absorbing every technical layer, she realized the mission wasn't just mechanical, it was human. If that aircraft failed mid-flight, lives would be lost. Missions would crumble. Entire operations could collapse. And they needed someone who understood the system intimately, someone who could read the machine as though it breathed. For the next several hours, she worked tirelessly inside the aircraft bay. Sweat beaded along her forehead as she reached into the belly of the machine, tracing wires, analyzing signals, recalibrating components that had not been touched since their classified installation. The crew watched her skill with silent awe. She didn't brag. She didn't look around to see who admired her. She focused, because focus was what kept people alive. Somewhere in those metal wings lay the power to protect soldiers who had families waiting, children hoping, and loved ones praying they would return home. And she was determined to honor that responsibility. As the hours passed, fatigue crept into her muscles, but she ignored it. When she tightened the final component and sealed the panel, she exhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the moment settle into her chest. The aircraft's systems flickered to life with a steady heartbeat, free from the instability that once threatened it. The crew burst into quiet relief. The mission could now proceed safely. Later, as evening settled across the ocean and the sky glowed in a muted orange, the captain visited her in the equipment bay where she sat on a metal crate, resting briefly. He stood there for a moment, observing her with a mixture of regard and unspoken emotion. Though no words are printed here, the gratitude in his eyes was unmistakable. Gratitude not only for today, but for years ago as well. She understood. They both did. Some moments do not need to be spoken to be heard. Ayesha felt a gentle sense of peace wash over her, something she had not felt in a long time. The world rarely gave closure to people like her, those whose stories remained hidden by classification stamps. But today, fate had offered a small piece of acknowledgement. And sometimes, that was enough. As night deepened, the captain personally escorted her back to the deck, ensuring she boarded the returning craft safely. The once hostile officer now stood at attention, his gaze humbled. The crew offered respectful nods as she passed. The wind was softer now, as if the ocean itself recognized her worth. And as the helicopter lifted from the carrier, she looked down at the deck where she had first been told she did not belong. Now, it glowed under the floodlights like a testament to the truth that sometimes the world will push you away, only for destiny to pull you back when the moment is right. Ayesha placed her hand over her chest, closing her eyes as the darkness embraced the ocean. She didn't need medals. She didn't need fame. All she needed was this, knowing that the lives she protected continued to carry forward, knowing that the courage she gave in silence had finally been seen, even if only by one person whose life she had once saved without ever expecting anything in return. And sometimes, the quietest recognitions are the ones that heal the deepest wounds. If this story touched your heart even a little, please consider liking and sharing the video. Your support truly helps stories like this reach more people who may need them. Special request to comment. Share below what moment in the story moved you the most. Your words mean more than you know.